interrupt this program with a special bulletin from the John Doe Radio Show. JDR News Live.
The human brain is made for thinking, not human experience. It's hardly a tinker toy or experimenting. Start fuming with drugs.
Why do we talk about marijuana? It's the single biggest drug that is a source of some confusion.
This is really about educating the public about the fact that marijuana is a less harmful drug.
Marijuana, that's to get high.
You can be as high as you want.
The prohibition of marijuana over the last 71 years has not actually prevented you from using marijuana.
You feel weak.
Closer to winning the war on drugs.
I do believe there have been some successes.
We will never arrest our way out of this problem.
Welcome to the John Doe Radio Show, JDR News Live, daily, hanging out with you here, Monday through Friday, starting at 6 o'clock Mile High time, whatever time that is, wherever you're at. Or if you would just like to listen to the recorded versions of our show, you can't catch us live at youtube.com/John Doe Radio. All you got to do is go to our website, johndoerad.io. It's a pretty badass website name. Just kind of fell into our laps. Luckily, that .io type situation is sweet. John Doe Radio. Anyway. Again, thanks for hanging out with us. Big thanks to our sponsors that make the JDR possible. We could not do this without the financial support of our good friends around us. If you do get a chance, check out weedbiz.net. If you're listening to us not live, the recorded version of JDR, or check it out our website. The reason why it is out there in cyberspace, just floating around. That's how I kind of picture the internet sometimes. Sorry for our not-so-stony friends out there, but it's just like floating out in nowhere. John Doe Radio. I don't know. Anyway, neither here nor there. Make sure you check out weedbiz.net. Our good friends over at weedbiz.net have these awesome grow pods for you. You can check them out, pick them up. Not some jank type of situation. It's put together, duct tape, super glued. Actually something that is well put together and something that's going to be able to turn your cost on the actual product over quite quickly. So check out weedbiz.net. Not just the grow pods there, but also brand spanking new news. A lot of news from the South also being tracked there on weedbiz.net. Make sure you check them out. Also, big thanks to the John Doe Radio Show's main sponsor right now, JDR News, brought to you by our good friends over at USACannabisconsulting.com. Holler at them if you need to navigate the cannabis regulatory system. You need somebody that knows exactly what they're talking about, somebody that is well-versed, has gone through the muck and the swamp to get to the other side to figure out how exactly we're going to do this correctly. You need somebody like that. They can also do construction work for you. USACannabisconsulting.com is your place to go, and also yourgraphics.com is our website designer. And if you need a website design, make sure you holler at him. URGRAFIX.com. It's the JDR. Let's get to it. Today on the John Doe Radio Show, we have a good friend known for quite some time, also a podcaster himself, Larry Love, going to join us from New Mexico. Story I'll get to here real quick before we holler at him. About 15 after, we'll get in touch with him. But there's a lawsuit going on in New Mexico based on their system of how patients get a hold of cannabis. So we'll talk with him about that. We'll see what's actually going on with the system in New Mexico, how it operates, how cannabis patients become legal, how they get their cannabis, and what his experience is. Anything else he'd like to sit down and talk about. Not sure how long that conversation will be. Who knows? Could be 20 minutes, could be 3 hours. No, I don't think Larry has that much time to sit down and BS with us. Maybe he does. So that's the big thing for today on the John Doe Radio Show. Also in news for you today, it was explained to me earlier by a good friend through PM that I'm not saying Bernie Sanders' name right. I don't know if it's like ever since Larry Sanders came in, it's just something I've been stuck on the Saunders side of things. So Bernie Saunders. It's not right. Bernie Sanders. We'll talk about him. He's not the first major presidential candidate to say marijuana should be legal. Denver area drug cop is warning Nebraska lawmakers of medical marijuana's slippery slope. One of them dang old anti-drug statements. It's like we talk about many, many, many times before, how the police are paid to put you in jail. The police are paid to tell you how horrible drugs are. It's not their job to say how cannabis can be beneficial for you or how the system is just completely broken. In fact, those officers are taking off the force. We get to that, and also I have the numbers in front of me from what we talked about yesterday with Colorado monthly marijuana sales slumping in December. Mentioned that the September 16th pot tax holiday that we did have here in Colorado was probably a big reason for that. A lot of people going to dispensaries, stacking up on their supplies for the month, 2 months, however much that they went and bought. But really, the month before, we had $100+ million in tax income for medical and recreational. So hitting that number again the next month, something that would have been amazing too. Number's still extremely high. $80 million in tax in 1 month? I mean, it's no Alibaba yesterday making $9 billion in sales for that website. I wonder if they have China rigs on Alibaba. Because I know obviously we all know DH Gate, a cheap place to go get knockoff rigs from children that are busy in sweatshops making these things for you. I don't know if it's actually children in sweatshops. I really don't know who An Meng actually hires to do the work for him, but it's crazy. $9 billion in transactions yesterday for that Alibaba website. And it's this overseas holiday created for people to shower themselves with gifts. The 11th day of the 11th month in the 2015 year is hereby known as Shower Myself Day. Not that kind of shower. I don't know, I was thinking of something else, like a golden shower or something like that. That's neither here nor there. And if we get to it, still news stories on tap, either tomorrow or the next day, fighting in the cannabis industry. And this article that I would really like to get to today, because it hits home. And also, who the fuck is Ben Carson trying to be? I mean, is he just like... I think of him as a few different type characters, like maybe he's the Grinch or one of those dumbass cartoon characters. It's just crazy, man. How can a person that smart, a person who is a brain surgeon, have so many fucked up ideas about life? I guess that's what it's like when you're sheltered your entire life and taught some of the most ridiculous things. Even so, I don't know how an African-American can say some of the things that they do, and the only thing I can think back on why they say some of the things that they do is because they just lived this sheltered life, or possibly hated the people that grew up around him and experienced some of these problems that he's talking about, like drug addiction. If you're a drug-addicted person, you have a lack of values and principles. It's just extremely frustrating. It's nuts. Anyway, if you're hanging out with us live in the chat room, youtube.com/John Doe Radio, Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock Mountain Time. Toss me a message if you got any questions, you got any comments. Larry telling me, yes, he does have 3 hours. We're podcasters, we're radio hosts. We can sit here and talk to each other for hours and hours and hours. It's like I talk to you here for an hour. I could easily do 2 hours, 3 hours every day here on the show. I might run out of shit to say, and then it just might be me rambling here like I have been. And unless you're into that type of thing, and that's the reason why you listen to JDR, maybe, that would be fantastic for you, but might be a little bit too much. For every broadcaster that you add into the broadcast, it adds another hour of time that we have to sit down and spend talking. I can't just do a 15-minute news show. That's what was really planned for JDR News Live, was just 15 minutes, quick read of the news, go off on it. But then, as I started to think about that more and more and got into it more and more, really, at that point, is all we'd be doing is reading the news stories and then very little analysis or feedback for you. So I feel like the feedback is what makes JDR what JDR is. Otherwise, we'd just be a Reuters or the Associated Press for cannabis and reading other people's news stories. Anyway, let's get to it. When we do get Larry on the phone, this is what we're going to be talking about mainly. Jane Flores-Williams is a Denver-based attorney, but he's taken on the cause of medical marijuana patients in New Mexico, particularly those who live in rural areas without easy access to MMJ. In recent weeks, he's filed 2 court documents, including one today that take up their cause, including a complaint that says the current system forces patients outside metropolitan areas to wait for MMJ drop-offs at McDonald's or Walmart branches. In his view, this situation not only violates privacy rights when it comes to their medical care, but also makes them susceptible to becoming crime victims. He says, imagine a group of patients, many of them elderly or on respirators, all having to sit at a McDonald's while they wait for their medical marijuana to be delivered. It's like having to score heroin in Times Square. He says everyone knows why they are there and who they are, and it's because this is a cash-only business that it sets up a situation for them to be jacked. If not, something else violent happening. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Because as you know, bad people take bad opportunities and run for them. They may think they're good opportunities, but they end up being bad. Like the story we talked about yesterday about the guy in Boulder. 2 dudes in Boulder pistol whipped some guy because he wouldn't hand over his weed. 12 hours later, he's found by the police, gets in a police chase, stoppers pulled out, dude crashes his car, and there's video of the last moments of this guy's life out there. I saw it yesterday, and you just hear 20 shots of guns going off. Pop, 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 pop. And it took about that long. Like, usually it's a situation where it's like, pop, 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 pop. This dude just kept shooting at this motherfucker. Anyway, you don't want to end up in a situation like that. So we definitely don't want to be the people. If we're trying to be responsible, we're trying to organize the system, trying to make the system better for people out there. That's the last thing that we want to have them do, have us do. Put them in danger of being robbed or hurt or something else. The lawyer traces many of the issues related to MMJ access in less populated portions of New Mexico to the administration of Governor Susana Martinez, who he says has gone on record as saying she doesn't want the program. Under the system, he goes on, the New Mexico Department of Health is tasked to regulate marijuana programming for licensed card-holding patients, but they've done this in a way that violates equal protection. Says this lawyer, most dispensaries have only been approved in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. And really, that's all I hear is that if you want to get your weed, better be near Albuquerque or Santa Fe. And regional and poor areas have been left out in the cold, even though tons of veterans, elderly cancer patients, and mine workers live there and really need this stuff. The only way they can get it is to have it delivered from a licensed dispensary in one of the bigger cities, and under privacy and HIPAA laws, it should really be delivered to their homes. But what's happening is that these delivery drivers are sending out group texts to all the patients in Raton, New Mexico, or Grants, New Mexico, or places like that saying, okay, I'm coming in on Saturday. Everybody go to the McDonald's between 2 and 6 p.m. As a result, Flores-Williams, the lawyer, contends that various McDonald's branches, as well as affiliates of Walmart and Travel Centers of America, both of which are mentioned in the lawsuit, have become de facto drug distribution centers in violation of federal law and likely without the knowledge of the companies themselves. Although Flores-Williams has sent a letter to each of the firms informing them what's going on. Additionally, Flores-Williams has filed a petition for what is known as a writ of mandamus. I can't think. There's got to be some sort of funny joke out of that, but I can't think of it right now. The filing asks the New Mexico Supreme Court to mandate the approval of medical marijuana provider in the western part of New Mexico, where the nearest dispensary is often many miles away. The writ is based on equal protection in the most basic sense, Flores-Williams says. The law is supposed to treat us all the same, whether we live in a city or a rural part of the state, but if you're a medical marijuana patient, you basically have no access to the medication. That makes you dependent on these deliveries, which violate all kinds of laws. Patients are being forced to go to public places in this new black market to buy their marijuana. Could the lawsuit endanger the medical marijuana program as a whole? Flores-Williams is hoping language in the complaint prevents such a possibility. He says in the section where we ask for injunctive relief, there's a preemptive strike. We specifically say, please, court, don't let Martinez administration use this as a reason to shut down the entire program. And that's something they might try to do. The quickest analogy is to the Voting Rights Act. The government came in and said everyone had an equal right to vote, but some places in the South were made impossible to vote. And then they said things are so bad that we're going to dump it, the whole program that is, and not follow the law, and we don't want to see that type of thing happen in New Mexico. So let's get to someone that's actually from New Mexico and give us some feedback on what the hell is going on down there. Ring-a-ding-ding-a-ling. Look, this... the number I'm calling, it even shows me on my program here that I'm calling...
Larry.
Hey, Larry, what's up? Hey, my program here kind of shows me almost exactly where you are. It doesn't give me a house address, but I see where you're at in New Mexico, which is neither here nor there, but cool.
I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it's a writ of mandamus.
Writ of mandamus.
Yes, in Canada, they call it whatever you said.
Well, here on
anyway,
JDR, we like to spin
Tim,
things in the JDR way and
welcome.
make up our own JDR-isms, I guess you could say. What were you saying?
Absolutely. I want to welcome you back. You've been missed for the last couple of years. I'm a long-time listener and not a first-time caller, but I welcome you back. And you were missed, and I'm glad that you're doing well.
That means a lot to me, man. I thank you very much for that. I can't tell you enough how much that does mean something to me. So, but I'm not the only one that does podcasting. So give us first kind of a background of what you do, who you are, what's the deal?
Well, in 2009, I became the 343rd patient in the state. There were no dispensaries when I first got my license, and the first one that was licensed, which is now out of business, they had to sue the state in order to get their license.
Uh-huh.
So it's always been very, very hard from day one, even with the Democratic Richardson administration, to get marijuana. So the first legal marijuana, medical marijuana that I ever purchased was in a parking lot on St. Michael's Drive, and it was all, being the first legal purchase I ever had, and I waited 40-something years for this. It was also the most public purchase that I ever had. So this is a problem that we've been having, for 6 years.
And I'm a big fan of, I was a huge fan of Governor Richardson, fantastic governor, I think, for New Mexico. Even more so, a massive fan of Governor Gary Johnson. Just a fantastic person. I've met him multiple times, whether it's at cannabis conventions or press conferences, whatever it is. One of my favorite politicians out there. In fact, almost everything that he says with his libertarian values, I don't think there's one thing I've disagreed with him on. And a big reason why you do have medical marijuana in New Mexico is because of him. And he's also the first politician that I know of in office to say, yeah, I use medical marijuana. So what about it?
I didn't live here when Gary Johnson was the governor. I understand that he was a proponent even before I think he had an accident.
Yeah, he had a hang gliding accident is what happened. And I'm sure he was a proponent before. It's kind of what led him to using medical marijuana. But yeah, had a crash with a hang glider, damaged himself up, screwed his back up heavily, and then started using cannabis as he was a governor in office, which is just sweet. And it's absolutely unheard of for any other politician to do that. So New Mexico, a great place. I've been through New Mexico a few times. People may say it's kind of dull and maybe boring, but very interesting people there. The culture in New Mexico is just so extremely deep, and it's a cool spot. But when it comes down to cannabis, access there. And I've heard from many patients talking about how it takes forever for them to drive to get to places, that strain sharing isn't necessarily the easiest thing there. Give us an overview of what it takes to get your medical marijuana card there and what access is like. And then we'll go specifically, I guess, a few more questions, a few more things about what these people are filing a lawsuit on behalf of.
Sure. Well, originally, back in 2009, I couldn't find a doctor that would even write a recommendation. They're not writing prescriptions because that's a federal thing. But so it was hard to find doctors, and it's a little bit better than it is now. You can get in for chronic pain. It required 2 signatures at one time, but now it's only going to require 1. So there has been changes to the program, and it's been a little bit easier to get in. We have, I think, 21 or 22 conditions now that you can qualify for, which includes Parkinson's and ALS and epilepsy, of course, and chronic pain, peripheral neuropathy. There's a lot of stuff. So we now have over 18,000 patients in the program, and it's doubled in about the last year. So access to the medicine is becoming harder and harder, and it doesn't help that some of the 23 licensed producers sort of aren't in this for the medical end of things, but they're sort of sitting back and waiting for recreational to happen. So it's been tough, and prices have been high.
What are prices like there if a medical patient is going to get someone? So do you have storefronts, you're saying?
Finally, we were allowed to have storefronts. There was a time when you could not even mention the name, the word dispensary. And but finally, storefronts opened, and now multiple storefronts have opened. Some of the 23 licensed producers have 2 and 3 locations, okay. And then of course they just licensed 12 new applicants last month, and that's where the controversy starts.
So but these stores are not necessarily, the 12 stores you said, they're not spread across the state. Are they all pretty centralized into one location?
Well, there are some that are out, in outlying areas, not very many. I think there's one in Farmington. There's a whole bunch in the Albuquerque, Bernalillo County area. We have 4 currently here in Santa Fe. There are some in Roy, and so there's 23 licenses that are licensed to grow the medicine, and then those people have opened up, most of them, multiple locations. So okay. There's a lot, but they are really concentrated in Albuquerque.
So caregivers, somebody can grow weed for you, and you could go get cannabis from somebody that's a caregiver?
No, absolutely not. Caregiver system here in this state, New Mexico, is you are allowed to grow. If you're a caregiver, you have to sign up with a patient and get a card that says you're a caregiver. You have to go through very big background checks, federal background checks, fingerprints, and all that stuff. And then if you get the caregiver license, you can only grow for that patient in their home, in their location. So it's not a real caregiver situation where a caregiver can grow a lot of good meds and then give it to their patient. That is not the way it works here.
Yeah, that's kind of a frustrating system because that really is why a lot of patients fight for that specifically is, number one, obviously they would like to have, smaller control, going with a caregiver, someone that's, does a small boutique grows incredible medicine. But also on the other side of it, it's not like here in Colorado where we have dispensaries all over the place. Taxes are obviously involved. It's the access that caregivers give to these patients that's really on top of it, and what they're looking for. And then also what some people don't necessarily think of that aren't involved in medical marijuana all the time. They think, or people that don't know anything about cannabis and how it can help people, they think that you should just be able to go to this store and then that store has everything you could imagine. They have CBD strains, they have high THC strains, they got great edibles, great caps, and it's not necessarily like that. The sharing of strains and getting quality products is not maybe the easiest thing to do in places like New Mexico from what I've seen.
Well, it's been very restrictive here.
Yeah.
The Department of Health and the Medical Cannabis in New Mexico has always erred on the side of law enforcement.
Yeah.
Originally, the licensed producers could only grow 95 plants. That a few years later went to 150, and now the licensed producers can pay a $30,000 fee for each 150 up to 450. So that's $90,000 a year for licensed dispensaries that want to grow 450 plants, and that's where it's capped off at.
So wait. 90?
The problem is
$90,000 for a dispensary to be open, and they're paying those fees to the state. And what the state is probably saying these fees are is to keep track of you and to have staff to keep track of you. So $90,000 from each one of these places. Holy cow, dude.
That's a year. Yeah, that's $90,000 a year. Now, a dispensary/grower does not have to grow 450 plants. I know that some of them are staying at 150, which costs them $30,000 a year.
But see, even that amount, I mean, if you're 150 plants, that's really not that many plants, especially when you walk into some places here in Colorado or wherever it is. I mean, you see just like rooms and rooms and rooms and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of plants. I mean, even 500 plants at $90,000 a year, just, I mean, it's just so outrageous to me, and playing off of the fear of cannabis, period, end of story. So I can see how things maybe haven't kicked off there as well as they have.
Here's what happens.
Go ahead.
Tim, here's what happens. The Department of Health Medical Cannabis Program, licensed 23 producers, until last month, and then they just licensed 12 more. But at the same time that they're going through this application process and they're vetting these people, they have always been afraid that an excess amount of cannabis is going to go out the back door.
Yeah.
These people that they trusted and gave these licenses to, the Department of Health thinks that they're going to also, these same people will sell stuff out the back door. So that's why they limited the plant count for all this time. And that's why it took them so long to actually open up the process for new licensees. And it took, from last May until October to get them to license 12 new people. And one of them, by the way, is a company called Shift out of Colorado that is hooked up with a local new applicant, and they were licensed, I believe, here in Santa Fe. Are you familiar with the Shift people in Colorado? You have any insight on them?
I have never heard of Shift. That's something that's brand new to me.
So we'll have to wait and see. So if you want to get into the controversy now with the lawsuit?
Yeah. One thing I want to say before we do get to that is that what's frustrating is that, do you have a system in New Mexico with the dispensaries, with people is there an inventory system that's plugged into the state where the state can track the seed sale?
What?
Seeds to
that's
harvest?
That's going to start in 4 days.
4 days.
4 days from now. And I doubt if this is really going to happen because the Department of Health here never enforces anything. They gave a contract to BioTrack, I think there's another name to that, in Florida, who is got the contract for the Department of Health and the Medical Cannabis Program. Now, BioTrack is going to keep track of all the sales, all the inventory, and everything, and the licensed dispensary producers, they are going to have to use, let's say, if they use MJ Freeway, which is one of the most popular, point of sale software.
Yeah.
There's an integration between what the software that they're using at the dispensaries with the Department of Health, and that's all going to start in about 4 days, so they say. And there are some really weird new rules here where they are actually the Department of Health Medical Cannabis Program will cut you off if you have purchased more than what they're calling, I think it's 270 units, they're not even calling them grams, in a 3-month period. So they're actually going to cut people off from their medicine. If they need a little more, they can actually apply get their doctor's note, but it's going to be a crazy system.
Now, those rules have been in place since the beginning, right? As far as how much you can buy, the limits, all that good stuff. That's been since the very beginning, right?
Well, this is sort of an updated rules. From the very beginning, I think you could have 6 ounces in a 4-month period or a 3-month period. And then, of course, there was no way of keeping track of it until now, so I'm sure people did buy more. Originally, I guess that was put into place so people weren't buying a lot of stuff and selling it to their friends and so forth. And, I worked the front. I helped open and manage for 2 years the front of a dispensary. So I've got a lot of experience dealing in that end of the world, meeting patients, helping patients. And, several times I had people just blatantly bring their friends into the dispensary, buy an eighth, and then in front of me would hand it off to their non-patients. So, the way I dealt with it was I banned those people from the dispensary because I was very protective of the program and of the licensed producer.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be smart about it. So you have a system in New Mexico where non-patients can actually come inside the dispensary?
Well, at that time, it was a little loose, and they could come into the dispensary.
Loosey-goosey.
I'm not real sure what's happening now. I don't go into the dispensaries very much, except for to say hello to some people. I am a licensed patient grower. The patients here in New Mexico, if you apply and you get a $30 fee, or if you're low on money, you can actually get that fee waived if you show your IRS taxes and all that stuff. But I've been growing my own, since the 70s. But here in New Mexico, it's rare that I go into a dispensary, but I do go every once in a while.
That's awesome. You've been growing your own since the 70s. That just makes me smile so big when I hear something like that, because I think of my lifetime, and I'm 32 years old, was born in '83, and I'm like, geez, that's just people like you are the reason why we're where we're at with reform here in America. Another thing that I've been hearing back from patients is, the strain availability, things like that. What's the rules like, say, if one of those shops or a caregiver or somebody that's licensed by the state, how do they, I guess you kind of answered this question with saying that there was going to be a tracking system put in for 4 days, but was it just like, you got these strains and poof, if somebody asks you, where did this strain come from? Did you get this legally? And it's more of a situation to where like, poof, it just appeared out of nowhere types thing. Is strain sharing very popular?
There's a lot of unsaid things going on that people don't talk about. First of all, the rule, the law that we have to abide by here in New Mexico is patient-to-patient transfers are illegal. If you were a medical patient and you came over to my house and we were hanging out, I couldn't hand you a joint. Yeah. It would be breaking the rules of the Linen Air Compassionate Act or the rules of the medical cannabis program. So that cannot happen. People are not allowed to give a cutting or a clone or seeds to another patient. So that's something that we've been fighting for a while. I'm hoping that we can get that changed now that the feds are really allowing us to have these medical dispensaries and now rec in your state and the others. So it's changed.
And it makes sense if you're not involved in the industry and you see how prescriptions are handled, and a person's name is on a prescription and it's technically illegal. If somebody else has the same Vicodin prescription or Ambien prescription, whatever it is, even though they have that prescription, it's still illegal for you to just hand it to them. Luckily, here in Colorado and some other states, both with legalization and medical marijuana, the passing of joints is not necessary. It's definitely not illegal here in Colorado anymore. So if you're at like a concert or something, it's still illegal technically to smoke inside and pass that back and forth. But if you're in your home, it's a fantastic thing for you to be able to be legally imbibing into your medicine or recreational use or whatever it is, and have friends over to participate with that. Because, and what a lot of people don't necessarily think of when it comes to quote-unquote medical marijuana, and what sucks about here in Colorado and some other places is that you don't have a great situation, a legal situation technically, where patients can come together, use cannabis together, have sort of a group type atmosphere. That's a healthy thing in itself. It pushes education forward, and it also helps with having group type therapy. Some of these people who are cannabis patients or seriously ill don't get a chance to get out of their house that much, or at least don't have places they can go, feel safe at, feel comfortable at. And having places like that, I think, is extremely important. So hopefully you guys do move to that side of things more quickly. Now, getting on to kind of the same thing that I was saying here is that what's the deal with delivering cannabis and the situation we talked about at the news story at the beginning where patients had to go to McDonald's or Walmart? What's the legalities on that? How is that happening?
Well, technically, I couldn't tell you whether there's federal laws about meeting in a McDonald's or a Walmart. It seems that the Mr. Flores Williams of Colorado, he's a lawyer and he has cited some instances that he feels is going to really help this lawsuit. Patients are risking their lives. Some of the patients are actually, risking their health because they can't drive 2 and 3 hours to go meet a delivery person.
For sure.
So what happened was this, Tim. The Department of Health Medical Cannabis Program opened up the process for new licensed dispensary growers, and they said that they would take into consideration the business plan and serving the outlying areas that are not being served right now. So Grants was an area to where Karen DeSoto, who is the woman that is named in those articles that you've been reading, and has filed the lawsuit along with a couple of patients who feel that they're jeopardizing their privacy and their health by having to drive and meet people. She wanted to have her grow in dispensary in the Grants area, which is where she's from, and she wanted to service this outlying area. The outcome to the 86 applications that were turned into the Department of Health was that they licensed 12 new grower dispensaries, but 8 of them were in the Albuquerque area, which already has like 15 dispensaries. Okay, one of them is in Santa Fe, which now I welcome a new dispensary in Santa Fe, and that's the one that is being run by Shift of Colorado.
Now, let me ask something here real quick.
The Department of Health really didn't do. Go ahead, Tim.
So is it because maybe in some of the more non-populated areas in the state that it's they don't want those dispensaries, or they don't want that there? Is it a conservative type issue to where that's a situation, or is the state allowed to say, look, we're forcing you into this?
Well, first of all, the state, and when we talk about the state, we're talking about the Department of Health and their cannabis program. They sort of have to want to do a better job, and they really aren't doing that. I'm very upset with what they did. They set out to license people who wanted to be in certain areas, yet unserved areas were not given a license, and that's why the lawsuit is going on. They feel that they had a great business plan. They just, I guess, somehow didn't score high enough. And, of course, there's a lot of controversy about what is the scoring based on. So these people are trying to take it to court and get a license to service the outlying areas. And other dispensaries that got licenses, most of them are not going to solve that problem of getting medicine to people who can't drive 2 and 3 hours each way.
Yeah, it just seems it seems politically motivated that some of those would only open, in the huge populated areas, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, for instance. So I can see how that would be frustrating. So they don't even know how people are scored to be able to be granted this permission?
Right. There's a lot of controversy about who did the scoring, why did certain people get licenses. One of the licenses went to a gentleman, and I say that politely, named Darren White, who was actually in the Gary Johnson administration. He's a former police officer in Albuquerque, and I think he was involved with public safety. And he, for years, from the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s, he was against marijuana, against cannabis. It's a gateway drug, blah, blah, blah. But guess who popped up and put an application in and actually got licensed?
Jeez.
This man who is now going to make a lot of money by opening up a grow and a dispensary, and he's been against against this medicine and recreationally for a long time. But now he's for it all of a sudden. And he's got a license to print money.
Jeez. See, that just tells me again right there that things are politically motivated. And frustrating thing is with police is no matter who they are or what they've done throughout their history, if you've been a policeman for 15, 20, 30 years, you put that on an application, you pretty much get pass go, collect $200, have yourself a fantastic day instead of the don't pass go, don't collect $200, go straight to jail. So I understand that side.
Well, if this former law officer, if he had, come out, as a supporter of marijuana and been a member of the group LEAP, which is a great organization with former law enforcement officers, then I would feel a little bit better about it. But no, he's not. He wasn't in LEAP, and he's just in this for the money. And that's part of the problem when medical dispensaries are just in it for the money. The patients suffer because of the quality and the attention that they're not getting.
Yeah, jeez. There's so many thoughts running through my head when it comes down to how the police are just given a pass on every single thing that they do. So going back to this lawsuit and talking about patients having to meet at McDonald's and Walmart and stuff like this, this has probably been going on since the beginning of the program there, which, by the way, what year was it that you guys implemented medical marijuana?
Okay, well, it passed in 2007. We never got a dispensary or able to get medicine to anybody or grow ourselves until 2009. Okay. And since then, it's slowly rolling out and and getting better. Even though we have people running this program, which really are not for the program, like you said earlier. Governor Susana Martinez said when she was campaigning to be governor and in her second term that she's against the medical cannabis program. It's a gateway drug, and she's a Republican, and that's their agenda.
Yeah, I watched that a few years ago when she got into office, and I watched some of the things that you were putting out there, and it's frustrating to see a state go from the pro medical marijuana stance that it was, having an administration, with Richardson, Governor Gary Johnson, having years of movement forward, and then having, and who knows, it might not just be her specifically, but the environment that she creates politically. But seeing that come in, I can't imagine how frustrating that would be. And it's different where you're at, too, because it's not like you have everybody in the state that supports cannabis, or the amount of people like we do here in Colorado that's based in Denver, Colorado Springs, Boulder. The centralized community that we have has an ability to fight these people when they come up with these stupid proposals and say dumb things. The backlash that comes to them is huge, and they've learned here in Colorado, I'm sure in California, Washington, Oregon, they've learned that you can't sit here and say marijuana is a gateway drug anymore. And seeing what's happening in New Mexico and statements like that being said, that's just so extremely frustrating on our side to have happen.
Well, when someone says that cannabis is a gateway drug, that's a red flag for me. Boing.
Yeah.
I know that they are part of the problem, and there's still a lot of people out there that just don't get it. They refuse to recognize that even the federal government has patent 6630507 that says that cannabis is good for shrinking tumors, Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's. I can go on and on and on. Yeah. So that conflict of the Schedule I and what the federal government is saying is something that needs to be worked out nationally. And what should happen, and my humble opinion is that the United States government should legalize medical federally, okay, and then let the states decide what they want to do recreationally, because the refugees, the people having to move from Texas to Colorado or from other states is just horrendous, and little kids are dying, and so are adults, because they can't get this real medicine. And the fact that the DEA head, Rosenberg, last week said that medical marijuana is a joke is a huge story, and something really needs to happen with this head of DEA.
Well, here's the thing: is the statement is bad. I agree 100%. But as you dig deeper into what he was saying, he wasn't exactly saying medical marijuana is ridiculous and it doesn't exist and people don't benefit from cannabis. I think he was talking about how people abuse the cannabis system, how medical marijuana has possibly led to legalization, some of these ailments that people have. I think he was borderline talking about that side of things and not necessarily saying the whole damn thing is just stupid, ridiculous, is a joke. Because as he went on to talk about it, he talks about how there needs to be research, that he has seen some people benefit from cannabis. So I think it was just a fact of that a lot of people in a lot of places didn't clarify exactly everything that he said. But bottom line is, you go back to him saying medical marijuana is a joke. I mean, that's a pretty broad statement itself. He shouldn't have made that statement. I can't see him getting rid
Not only did he...
Go ahead.
Not only did he say that, but the mayor of New York, Bloomberg, a couple of years ago, said that medical marijuana is the biggest joke of our time, biggest hoax of our time. So there are still people out there
for sure
that have this reefer madness still embedded in them. It's the way they grew up. They don't want to change their minds. They don't even believe, U.S. patent number 6630507. And
they don't even believe it exists. Like
what you and I have been doing for the last bunch of years is trying to educate people, and we need more people to do that.
Yeah, well, in New York, yesterday passed a couple emergency bills to be able to get access to patients quicker. So Cuomo over there in New York making a good decision on that side of things. They still definitely a worse medical marijuana system than you guys have in New Mexico. And I say worse, but really honestly, New Mexico is not the worst situation right now. And getting back to the access of things, so with this lawsuit and with people having to drive so far, what is the hopes of the outcome of this lawsuit? Because I think you know the lady that's part of this, don't you?
I do. I know Karen DeSoto. She was on my show a few weeks ago before she filed the lawsuit. It was, after she had gotten denied her license, and she's a great person. She's in it for the right reasons, as opposed to some of the other people that are in this industry. She's not looking to make a bunch of money. She's looking to get medicine to an area of the state that doesn't have it and that people are suffering. So she's an example of the right kind of person to get into this industry, and I guess her outcome, good outcome, would be to force the Department of Health to give her a license to supply medicine to those people.
And other people licenses, like we had talked about, that aren't just centralized to Albuquerque and Santa Fe. So I love New Mexico, specifically here recently, just because of Breaking Bad happening there. it's my favorite TV show of all time.
By the way, that was not a reality show. That was a TV show, a drama.
It's, the most badass television show, and possibly, it would have been the most badass reality show out there. No, I wish they would make another version of that, but then we were left with... what is it? The spin-off of that, the lawyer, Better Call Saul.
Better Call Saul.
Yeah. See,
and that's a great show, by the way. Better Call Saul is fabulous.
I actually kind of do have a lawyer, sort of like Better Call Saul. Rob Corey here in Colorado, I think fits the bill. Pretty close, if anybody knows who Rob Corey is and has spent time with him.
They might have based that character on Mr. Corey.
It really would be. So hopefully I don't have to me and him have been talking a bit lately, Rob Corey and I, lawyer here in Colorado, because I've been trying to get licensed to work in the industry here in Colorado. It's been about 2 months now since I applied for it. Haven't heard back from them. So if they do deny me, which I'm thinking that they're just waiting for these brand new rules to go into place, which is kind of weird how the system happened here. And I'll get to this real quick, go through this real quick. But we had these red line rules that were reviewed every year through our legislative process. We have changes that come to the medical marijuana and the recreational rules. Those rules going to be combined here, and pretty much are combined from the last time that I went to the Marijuana Enforcement Division offices. But not a lot of people know that they're combined. Not a lot of people know about these red line rules, changes to the medical marijuana system, changes to the recreational system. Bottom line is, it may seem like something. It may seem like I have a bunch of gusto and big balls and whatever to say that, if they don't give it to me, that I'm going to sue the system. But honestly, to me, that seems like a really scary type of situation to get into. Who knows what that would lead to? But I feel like it's something that I would have to do, like you there in New Mexico, that you guys have to create this situation to where ill patients are able to get access to their cannabis. To me, it's like here in Colorado, you should be able to be involved in the workforce and not be punished for your past history. Even if people that work at liquor stores are allowed to work there, it's just kind of our duty, is where I'm getting to with all that. All these things that we're doing, all these reasons why we're sticking our neck out, is not for us specifically. It's for other people. It's for our children to benefit down the line. So. And another frustrating thing about New Mexico and some other states is that if you don't, it's not like the super pot state that Colorado is, or California is, or Oregon or Washington. So when you're talking about cannabis, when you're trying to make changes, it's hard to keep that in people's mouths to be talked about. It's hard to keep that on the forefront. It falls off to the wayside, becomes a non-important issue for people that are running for office. So hopefully when we get this next governor to come into office, there in New Mexico, it can be a little bit bigger of an issue. Or maybe the feds can wave their wand and make a situation to where access or rules are a little bit better across the entire nation. Because I really do. I feel sorry for those people that are in some of those states to where this is a quote-unquote non-issue, because it really is. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we don't see reform in some areas, is because enough people don't care about it.
Right. Let me ask you this, Tim. Getting back to your situation, do you know of any other person that has been licensed or denied because of their legal situation?
I know people that have been refused their what am I calling it here? Your badge, basically, is what we call it here in Colorado. You can have a key license, which is a license if you're a manager or if you own the business, basically having control over a good portion of the operations of the business. And when you go through application process for that, a lot of what they look into is where your money has come from throughout the history in your life. So they got to try and track down every last cent. And then the other side of it is you do a FBI criminal background check if you're just trying to be a bud tender or a trimmer or whatever it is. But in that, talks about how specifically, and here's the rule that I'm specifically addressing and fighting, is that it says if your felony is no longer a felony, you are allowed, you may be granted a license. So there's some wording in there, the may be, may be granted a license, goes to... It's up to them. It's really up to them, and specifically, it's up to the director, Louis Koski of the Marijuana Enforcement Division here. He has to look over this large file I gave him. I don't even know how many pages it was, like 50, 75 pages that I have kept on to, luckily, throughout the years, since 2007 when I was convicted. But we do have some rules where it's like 10 years with a felony. I have to go back and read the red line rules because somebody else asked me before the show started, too. They have a drug felony from like 7 years ago and was looking to get licensed. And I'm like, well, it's definitely 10 years, and I'm not quite sure off the top of my head, or remembering the red lines, if it granted people with drug felonies access. At one point, it was if you had a drug felony, you're gone for life. So we'll see what happens. I do not know another person who is in my specific situation. I do not know if they've ever been granted a license before, and I think that's possibly one of the big things that's holding up my situation, is they're afraid to set precedent, and they're waiting for these red line rules, the new version of them all, to be put into place. So I'm ready for a fight. I mean, I don't have a whole lot to lose. Rob Corey possibly going to be doing this for free if we end up suing them. But it's just a scary situation, having to go to court, having to deal with the system as it is. That scares me. Being involved in it before and being damaged by the drug war as much as I have, seeing people around me struggle so much with these type of situations, it's scary. But I know that I'm not alone in the support that I have and the good that it would do.
Let me ask you this, Tim. What part of the industry interests you most? Do you want to be a grower? Where's your passion?
I mean, all of it. It really is all of it. Since 2007, I mean, I've been, even before that, was super gung-ho with cannabis, with reform. But then when an opportunity presented itself for us here in Colorado to start spitting out, great activists and legalize and set up dispensaries. I mean, 2007, 8, and 9 were really the big fight years here in Colorado where we had to push to be able to keep caregiver rights, and then those caregiver rights grew into what are now what you see out on the street with dispensaries and the corner shops, Broadsterdam, all that good stuff. I mean, I've grown for a while. I love growing. I love being in the garden and tending to those plants. And then I love the management side of it. I would love to help run a dispensary. I would love to help bring in new products, make sure that everything, is in order for the patients and the people that come in. And then also on the other side of the things of not spending time in a dispensary, but being a person, that goes out and visits dispensaries and sets up, displays. And, like when you walk into King Soopers or a grocery store or something, there's the lady that hands you the Vienna sausage that's brand new, and she's a rep from the company. That kind of thing is starting to pop up here in Colorado, too. I know Incredibles does that a lot. So, anything, man. I really don't want to trim. To be honest with you, I really don't want to trim. But
listen, trimming is very important.
I suck at it,
and we need trimmers. What's going on up there? What do trimmers get paid an hour in Colorado? Do you know?
It just really depends on where you're at. It probably is about $11 to $15 an hour. $15 an hour being on the extremely high side. That's probably someone that runs a trim crew. We have what do they call it? We have employment type agencies, job agencies, to where someone runs a business where they have like 20 people on there who are licensed to work in the industry and are trimmers, and dispensaries will call up these people and be like, yo, we just harvested, because some dispensaries may not time things right. There may not be work for some of their trimmers to do, so you may get laid off. You may not have enough hours as you want. So we've developed a system to where it's like a temp trim agency, basically, is what it comes down to. So, which is cool.
Do any of them get a per pound price, so that maybe it's not by the hour? Do people do that?
I'm sure that probably happens. I'm sure that's probably something that happens. I'm not specifically aware of which spots actually do that, but I'm sure it happens, and it makes sense for somebody to be able to be paid by the pound, because you have someone like me who's extremely slow and somewhat ADD when it comes to trimming. I'll finish off like, you grab a branch, you're trimming that branch. By the end of the branch, I mean, I'm about ready to crawl out of my skin, set the branch down, walk away for 5-10 minutes, go smoke a cigarette, go smoke a bowl, whatever it is, and then come back and sit down and trim again. It's not necessarily the type of person that these dispensaries are looking for. So they want the person that's the machine, trimming, which I cannot believe. I mean, I sat down and watched some of these trimmers do their work, and it's just amazing how quick that they can go. So more power to them. Is
there a difference between a medical trim and a recreational trim?
Not really, no. You got the Colorado trim where, a little bit of leaf is left on it.
Just like a landing strip.
Yeah, exactly. Different than maybe like the Cali outdoor trim or something like that, where the sugar leaves are hugging the bud. Which, if you grow a good plant, you grow good medicine, you grow good weed. A lot of those sugar leaves, in my opinion, I like them to be left on. I'm not talking about leaf. I'm talking about, a sugar leaf that's protecting the bud from some of the trichomes from falling off. It itself has a lot of benefits to it, the trim. And, I mean, I'm just not super picky. If the bud's good, the bud's good.
I totally agree with you. Let me just ask you a couple questions about Colorado. I did get to meet you once for a couple of minutes at the first High Times Cannabis Cup, and it was in that little small building, and that was quite an interesting evening. But tell me, what are the latest and hottest strains that are going around Colorado now, and any products that you might be seeing that haven't filtered down to other states yet? Any innovations?
First off, the first strain that comes to my mind, and I'm not too hugely familiar. I'm not in dispensaries a lot. I'm not, a bud tender or anything like that, so I can't specifically speak. And it's probably different for every dispensary that you go to. The Gorilla Glue is a huge seller, I'm sure, right now. It's one of my favorite strains that's out there. From a grower standpoint, from a dispensary standpoint, it's such a robust, great producing strain that it's hard. I don't know. To me, it would be hard to not do it would be hard to do a bad job with that strain. Products. Mm-hmm. On the product side of things, two of the biggest products that I'm super impressed with are the Incredibles people and Mary's Medicinals. Those patches that they make, for anybody that's not aware, Mary's Medicinals makes these CBD, THC combination patches. And I even think, I'm pretty positive, without having it right in front of me, I think anybody throughout the United States can order their CBD patch because it tests below the 0.3% CBD.
Right.
You can dog.
That would have to be from the Mary's Botanicals and not the Medicinals.
Yeah, Mary's Botanicals and not the Medicinals. But I'll tell you right now, Mike Hawley, who also does JDR with us, and will be back with us when we get in our brand new studio or find a spot outside of my casa to be able to do it. He's probably one of the heaviest stoners that I know on the face of the earth. Just maintains. Uses it for whatever. Anyway, he put on one of these Mary's medicinal patches, and you could see him not too long after just sweating his balls off. I mean, you could tell that he's just blasted through the roof. It was the highest that I've ever seen him when it comes down to it. So just from what I've heard...
But that was a CBD patch, right?
I think it was a THCA CBD patch. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but... I know that.
I think I heard the story, and he was like the highest he'd ever been, and supposedly it was like a CBD only type patch, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, and there's also some science that goes in behind it. We sat down and talked with a few people of why that may have happened, and it's your system gets built up with cannabinoids that aren't necessarily active or don't necessarily make you high, a high feeling type situation, but then you can flip a switch and that shiz can be activated and kind of send you over a little bit. So I'm not too familiar. I don't know the science behind that. It's just kind of what we heard through feedback from other patients, all that good stuff. By the way, for people that
I think Bike's blood might have been so hot that it decarbed the THCA and turned it into THC.
That is quite possible. Quite possible. For anybody wondering who we're talking with Larry Love. He's a New Mexican cannabis patient, activist, podcaster. Where can people get your podcast from?
They can go to mmjradio.com. They can go to my YouTube channel, LSLove88. I'm on Spreaker, SoundCloud, CannabisTube.net, On Now TV, 420radio.org links to us. So we're all over the place and trying to expand even more.
Awesome, man. Any other questions for me before we leave you?
Well, again, I want to thank not only you for your activism for the last bunch of years, but I just personally need to thank everybody in Colorado that voted for legalization for adults. This is something that I've been waiting for over 40 years. I started handing out normal pamphlets in the early 1970s, probably 72 or so in California. And so it's something that I've been waiting for. And Colorado, all you people that voted, I thank everybody in the other states and Washington. So onwards and upwards, we need to make sure that the federal government changes the status of the schedule. It should go off the schedule. Cannabis should be off the schedule. I was not really happy with the movement of Hillary last week, where she said she wants more research. We've got the research, okay? We've got it in Israel. We've got it in the Netherlands. We've got it in Spain. We've got it in England. They need to have faith in some of the people that have been doing this research. And there's plenty of research that have been done here in the States, in California, the University of California, all over the place. So before Obama leaves office, I think he needs to let this industry grow by fixing the banking situation and fixing the schedule situation.
Definitely a few things that need to be done. And who knows, I do think that drug reform, sentencing reform specifically here within the next year is going to be a huge topic of Obama. How far he goes into that, I have absolutely no clue. You mentioned rescheduling. Hillary coming out at the beginning of the week saying that, okay, we're fine. I'm okay with rescheduling. Problem is, if we reschedule it to Schedule 2, then that would eliminate almost every single medical facility that's out there with cannabis, because there's no way that they're going to be licensed. I mean, you thought it was hard to get a license in New Mexico, someone to be able to get a pharmacy license or a license to be a lab to study these things. I mean, good luck. That's just never going to happen.
It makes absolutely no sense for it to go to Schedule 2. Yeah. It really needs to be off the schedule. You can't put it on Schedule 2 and then at the same time have states legalizing for adult use. Yeah. It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. Well, it's talking with Larry Love here from New Mexico. He can explain to us, about access, patients issues that they have down there. So if you missed, make sure you go back, rewind the show, check out our recording on johndorad.io. It's posted there hour or two after we're done with the show. And if you ever have anything that you'd like to get at us with or any news, just please send it over to me and we'll get it on or have you on to kind of discuss it with us. It's better coming from you than from me, seeing as how you're in New Mexico. So,
absolutely. So I just want to give out the for the New Mexico patients that have to meet at McDonald's, the code word for this week is, do you want fries with that?
It's such a scary situation for those people to be in, and it makes no sense that the state would be okay for this happening. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. I would be outraged if I was a state legislator, if I was the governor. I mean, it would just blow me away. And hopefully it doesn't end up being a backfire type of situation to where they revamp the whole system and make it worse, like we had mentioned in the news article. So.
Well, I don't think they can do that. There's just 18,000 people that will start screaming. You can't unring a bell. We have a medical program here. Medical programs are now being allowed by the federal government, and recreational programs. So it's just about working out the details to let people prosper and get medicine to people. And then hopefully, in a few years, we will legalize for adults here. I know that a lot of New Mexico money on weekends travels over the border to Colorado to go to dispensaries there and to... I don't know if people are bringing things back. I have no idea. I've never done that myself. But we're losing a lot of money to Colorado. We need to legalize here in New Mexico. But while we have a Republican in office, it's probably not going to happen. But eventually it will happen. We need to string these states together. Yeah. Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona is going to probably legalize next year. California is going to legalize next year. Then you go up to Nevada is going to legalize next year. Then you got Oregon already and Washington. And we're covering the West, and we need to start moving east.
Yeah, and then just forget about Utah. It's not even there. It doesn't even exist when it comes to Utah and Oklahoma. Two of the states. Get away from
Utah's them. Afraid that the rabbits are going to get stoned.
Exactly. The deer that eat the plants. Oh, my God, we can't have that happen. Anyway, thanks, Larry.
There was actually a legislator that in Utah that said
I know.
That this would cause – it's crazy. It's a crazy thing. Anyway, thanks, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you tonight.
Yeah, big time thanks, and we'll keep in touch. So have yourself a fantastic evening, Larry.
Right.
Talk to you soon. See you.
Thank you, my friend.
John Doe Radio.
Peace out. Peace and love.
Radio.
Peace and love. Peace and love. I am no longer longer going to be allowing people to buy my music. But I still have peace and love. Peace and love. It's a Howard Stern reference there. Anyway, fantastic thanks to Larry Love, our good friend there in New Mexico, giving us some insights on medical marijuana in New Mexico. You got any other questions for me? Holler at me in the chat room, youtube.com/John Doe Radio. Let's get into a few other news stories here. Denver area cop wants Nebraska lawmakers of medical marijuana, warns Nebraska lawmakers of medical marijuana. Actually, first, what I really want to get to is this Ben Carson story. Some of this other stuff can wait for tomorrow. This is, by the way, from a website, a blog from palmpartners.com. This doesn't necessarily sound like a recovery center blog, more so than a porn blog. The Palm Partners porn blog. That's fantastic. You heard it here first. Anyway, despite medical science that reveals that drug addiction has a biological component and should be treated as an illness, Ben Carson believes that drug addiction is due to a lack of values and principles. Ben Carson instead calls for a return of a morality-based view on drug addiction and believes we should continue the war on drugs of the past. Just 2 weeks ago, Carson did an interview where he stated that he not only wants to continue the war on drugs, he wants to intensify it. Quite a bold statement for Carson during the campaign, considering the tone of the rest of the candidates has been on the decriminalization of drugs and emphasizing addiction treatment options. Palm Partners porn blog. On opposite end of the spectrum, this is a serious issue. God damn it, John Doe. We're joking about Palm Partners. On opposite ends of the spectrum, Democratic candidate Bernie Sanders announced... Did I say it right? Bernie Sanders. Not Saunders. It's not Larry Saunders. Bernie Sanders just announced he would be pushing a bill to make marijuana legal on a federal level. He believes that criminalization is ineffective and has not helped drug addiction issues in the United States. Though the war on drugs of the early 70s may have had good intentions, there is overwhelming evidence that it failed and actually increased drug addiction rates and resulted in mass incarceration. Besides the funniness that we said of the Palm Partners, the fact that this is coming from a drug addiction website is absolutely amazing and awesome. And it's the truth, god damn it! One of the biggest things that I've thought of here in the past 2 years is becoming eventually a drug counselor. Becoming an addiction counselor, addiction specialist, because of the situations that I've been through. But what keeps me from possibly doing that is the thought of how brainwashed the system it is and the things that I would have to go through and learn about that I know are absolutely not true. But maybe I could grin and bear it, go through those things, and then possibly try and be change on the other side. But holy guacamole, the amount of BS that you would have to wade through in order to get to that point to be an addiction, quote-unquote, specialist. And what addiction spot is going to hire someone like that fights against what the government is saying about addiction rates and how the drug war is this horrible thing? And actually look at what helps people in real life. I've mentioned it before. You may not be a big fan of the 12-step program, but the 12-step program can be guided to you. It can be formed around you. And if someone's not willing to have that type of situation, a sponsor, an addiction specialist, making you look to God, which is the big reason why people run away from a 12-step program. It's not like that everywhere. I'm positive proof right here. I didn't go to church. I didn't read out of the Bible. Anytime the good book says something like a higher power or God, quote unquote, you just in your mind think of what your higher power is. If it's science and energy and nature, all you got to do is put that God spot. Put that in there in that God spot. So don't let that chase you away from addiction. Don't let that chase other friends away from addiction. And if people complain about that system, you just got to find yourself a system that does work. Because there's something out there. Problem is, we, as a whole in America, just not that interested in putting the money and the effort into making it work for everybody. Instead of having this drug war and wasting millions and millions and billions of dollars put into this drug war and it going to police, literally going to police organizations, it should be going to facilities that open for substance treatment. So these people that are addicted or go to the ER don't muck up the ER system, our hospital system. They have an actual place they can go to where they're not just kicked out to the curb when they're done. Ben Carson announced he believes drug addiction has more to do with character than having an illness. Many are surprised by this opinion since Ben Carson is a retired neurosurgeon, and evidence shows that addiction actually alters the way the brain functions on a chemical level. Holy guacamole, man. I used to fight that idea for the longest time. That I even to myself thought it was a choice. I'm doing this because it's a choice. I'm drinking all this because it's a choice. I'm popping a pill and I'm drinking as much as I can because it's a choice. And yes, it is probably a choice at some point. But even to this day, it's like, I don't want to drink, period. I don't want to drink. I don't want to feel like shit. But there's a little tinge and this just electrocution inside of your brain that tells you want to get away. The way to do it is to go abuse. You can't explain it. You don't know why it happens. For people that have been addicted to drugs for years and years and years, down the road, still fighting that situation. I watched Steve-O and Joe Rogan the other day on a podcast, Joe Rogan's podcast, and it is absolutely amazing what Steve-O put himself through in order to get sober. Completely shifted gears into a whole nother life. Not being Joe Rogan had a joint sitting in front of him, and Steve-O was thanking Joe Rogan for not lighting up the joint. And it wasn't the fact that, he didn't want to get secondhand smoke, which is obvious, but the simple fact that it was just such a beautiful smell. So I can't imagine separating yourself from everything, from every drug, and 10, 15 years later, which Steve-O hasn't been sober for 10, 15 years. I haven't been sober for 10, 15 years, but I hear it time and time again from people that have been sober 30, 40 years that it's still a situation that they have to deal with. And a lot of people that don't understand addiction out there are like, okay, you've been sober for a couple years, you've been sober for 10, 15 years. They don't get how that one beer or that one joint or whatever it is, that one pill, maybe you broke your leg and you go to the hospital. To me, one of the scariest situations that I could ever be in, again, would be a situation to where I have to take a painkiller. This is just either suffer through the pain or have to take a painkiller because you don't know what kind of receptors and what kind of electrocution to your brain that's going to do, and you end up being maybe on the other side of the table again, losing everything that you've done. I mean, it's true. You could be sober for years and years and years and throw away everything in just 1 second. Everything that you've accomplished, everything that you've rewired in your brain and move towards that one drink. And it's not just you saying, okay, that one drink has set me back forever. No, it physically can set you back to the very beginning where you started from before, and having to rebuild from that point is one of the most frustrating, hardest things that I have ever had to do. It's the most frustrating, hardest thing that I've ever had to watch somebody else go through, and I can't imagine what it was like to be one of the good friends of me who I just tore into and burnt bridges with and was trying to literally kill myself at that time. It starts to get me teared up right now. I mean, it's a super emotional type situation that the reason why we're not doing better for people that are addicted is because not enough people understand it. Not enough people understand the process. Not enough people understand what these people go through because they don't care. And they throw people out to the wayside. Toss them to the curb. They're taken out with the trash. And that sucks. And that sucks that we put so much money into a system to punch people in the face rather than reach out a hand and pull them up. I could go on for a long time about that whole side of things. Let's finish out this news story, or this blog post. Dr. Carson told CBS News anchor John Dickerson that there is all kinds of addictions, and addictions occur in people who are vulnerable, who are lacking something in their lives. So we really have to start asking ourselves, what have we taken outside of our lives in America? He continued on to say that he is not going to throw away his values and principles for the sake of political correctness. When he asked about a recent poll that showed 25% of New Hampshire voters believe drug addiction is the state's most serious problem, Carson stated that America must have the determination to continue the war on drugs and not lose focus because opinions that are gaining in popularity. He says, What are some of those values and principles that allowed us to ascend the ladder of success so rapidly to the pinnacle of the world and the highest pinnacle anyone else had ever reached? And why are we throwing away all our values and principles for the sake of political correctness? I have no clue half of what this bastard says. None of it makes sense to me. Carson's comments come after Princeton released findings that rising death rates for middle-aged white population may be due to substance abuse problems. There also have been a sharp rise in suicide rates, and drug abuse was cited as being a major reason for the increase. Heroin-related overdose and deaths across the U.S. have become a national epidemic. Recently, President Obama issued a memorandum to combat addiction to heroin and other opioids. Obama's focus has also been on treatment and not criminalization, and he has attempted to change the focus of drug addiction in the United States. Obama traveled to West Virginia to unveil a series of initiatives to combat addiction to heroin and other opioids. This blog says, overall, Ben Carson believes we should not give up the war on drugs, and we should push to promote values for those suffering from addiction. I can't tell you how emotional this topic makes me. I mean, it's literally a situation to where if I start to think too much about the past or too much about what I put other people through, what I put myself through, I really, really, really have to fall back on what I've learned to make myself a better person, the tools that I've developed over the past couple of years to stay that strong person. Because it's just so easy. Why some people sometimes fall off the wagon. And this will be probably one of the last things that I say here on the JDR. We'll move on to these other news stories tomorrow. But some of the reasons why some of these people fall off the wagon so easily is because during one of the steps or during the process, you're kind of forced in any given way, whether it's you're looking back on your time or you're going through the steps, you're taking an inventory of yourself, and you're taking an inventory of the wrongs that you've done to other people and looking at those and seeing how they've affected other people's lives and where you could have looked at those situations a little bit differently and where you can correct those situations in the future. If you're a drug addict and you're someone that has done a lot of really shitty things in your life, when it comes down to taking that inventory, it can crush you. There are things that you don't remember, that you sit down and talk to your friends about, and they'll tell you, remember this? And you're like, no, I don't. I don't remember that. And it hits you so hard that it can drive you back under. But if you've gone through the right processes, the right steps, you've had yourself a great sponsor, great people to get you through, when it comes those times, and it hit me here, as I'm reading this Ben Carson situation, it hit me. Something in my brain said, eject, and wanted to collapse, and everything just fall apart. I mean, it did. It's. I cannot explain it to you, the feeling. I cannot explain the fear that you get at that point in time. But if you're good enough, and I mean good enough by if you've gone through the system enough, you've worked on it enough, there are tools out there that you fall back on that instantly, boop, pop into your head to prevent those things from shoving you off the edge, to prevent those things from driving you down. It can happen. Tomorrow on JDR, we'll get to the rest of the news that I have for you, including, well, here, real quick, we'll go over these numbers. 4 consecutive months of growth in medical marijuana and recreational cannabis sales in Colorado saw a downturn in September. As we talked about, September 16th date probably led a lot of people to not spending money or not collecting taxes. So revenues from recreational pot sales dropped to $56.4 million in September, while medical sales were at $38.2 million in September, a decline of about $3 million each from the record-setting August sales. So combine those together, you're pretty damn close to still $100 million. $90 million plus in taxes coming in. September was the fourth consecutive month that recreational cannabis sales topped 50 million. The state anticipated losing $3.6 million in revenue due to the one-day tax holiday. Nearly $700 million of medical and recreational marijuana was sold in Colorado in 2014 in only 9 months of recorded data. In 2015, numbers have already passed last year's mark with more than $730 million in cannabis sold in stores. If you're a state legislator, if you're someone that's looking for some cash to spend on programs, why aren't you looking at marijuana? Why aren't you looking at legalization? It's kind of hard not to, especially when you've been lied to your whole life. You take a peek out the window and see the sunshine outside, and marijuana's not this dull killer drug that you thought it was. Have yourself a fantastic day. Big thanks to the sponsors that make the John Doe Radio Show possible. USA Cannabis Consulting.com if you need to find someone to open up a shop for you, build a shop for you, navigate you through the regulatory system. USA Cannabis Consulting.com. Our friends over at yourgraphics.com, URGRAFIX.com if you need a website built. And last but obviously not least, the reason why you're listening to us, if you're listening to us on a recording, people that offer us the space on the World Wide Webs. That crazy thing where things just float out in space. Check out weedbiz.net. Until we meet again tomorrow, I'm John Doe. See ya.
Radio show is produced by Charlie Stash Entertainment. The John Doe Radio Show programming is not limited to information on agriculture subjects and is intended as an informational and entertainment purposes only. We specifically include responsible marijuana reform. Rights. Listening to anyone but your mother is just plain stupid. We accept no responsibility for your actions or misrepresentations, and we do not fully endorse the use of illegal drugs. You are ultimately responsible for yourself.